Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most mind-bending spiritual texts ever written, the Diamond Sutra. We're here to unpack a concept that really challenges the very idea of who we think we are, the idea of no self.
So, our whole journey kicks off with a question. And this question was asked about 2,500 years ago, but honestly, it could have been asked yesterday. A student, Subhūti, asks his teacher, the Buddha, something that sounds simple but is incredibly deep. How should we live? How can we get a handle on our own minds?
And the Buddha's answer? Whoa, it's a total paradox. He says the path starts with this huge intention to save every single living being out there. But then, in the very next breath, he says, and when you've done it, when they're all liberated, guess what? No one has actually been liberated. What? That's the central mystery we're going to solve today.
Okay, so let's start with that first part, the seeker's question. And look, this isn't just some casual back and forth. This initial exchange is the launchpad for a really profound investigation into the nature of reality itself.
I know what you're thinking. That makes zero sense. It sounds like a complete contradiction, right? But that's the whole point. That contradiction is the key. And the Buddha doesn't just drop this bombshell and walk away. He immediately starts to explain why this crazy-sounding statement is actually the absolute truth of it all.
He lays it out pretty clearly. He says, look, to get this, you have to first ditch 4 really powerful, deeply held illusions we all have. In fact, he says that as long as you're holding on to these ideas, you can't really be a bodhisattva, an enlightened being who's trying to help everyone else.
And here's the thing about these 4 illusions. They're basically just different ways of saying the exact same thing. It all boils down to our core mistake, the belief that we are these fixed, independent, separate selves. The feeling of me over here, totally separate from you over there, that idea right there is the biggest roadblock on the path.
So that leads us right into the next big idea, this concept of an enlightenment that you don't get. And to really drive this home, the Buddha tells a story about his own past. And trust me, this story is designed to completely flip everything you think you know about learning and achievement. He turns to his student, Subhūti, and asks him a really pointed question. He's like, hey, think back. When I was studying with my teacher, the Buddha before me, did I get something? Was there some specific teaching, some tangible thing he gave me that just, poof, made me enlightened?
And Subhūti, he's a sharp student. He totally gets it. He replies, no. As I understand your teaching, you didn't obtain something you could just label enlightenment. You see, it's not a trophy you win at the end of the game. It's not a certificate you can hang on your wall.
And the Buddha's like, bingo. That's it. It was precisely because there was absolutely nothing to obtain, no secret knowledge for me to acquire, that my teacher knew I was on the right track and would one day become a Buddha. So, this obviously brings up a huge question for all of us, right? You're probably thinking it right now. If there's nothing to get, no goal to achieve, then what's the point of all this? Why meditate? Why study? Well, hold that thought, because the next section gives us the logical tool that unlocks this whole puzzle.
All right, section 3. This is where we get the secret decoder ring for this entire text. It's called the logic of not A. And what it is this really clever linguistic tool. It's kind of like a mental crowbar to help our minds break free from all these rigid concepts and see reality as it truly is.
Okay, the big idea behind this logic is a concept called emptiness. And let's be super clear right away. This does not mean nothingness. It's not a big black void. All it means is that things are empty of a fixed, independent self. Nothing exists all by itself. Everything is part of this huge, interconnected, constantly changing web of existence.
So here's the formula. And yeah, at first glance, it looks like complete nonsense. A is not A, therefore it is A. I mean, what? But stick with me. This is an incredibly powerful tool for deconstruction. And the best way to get it is to see it in action. So let's use a concrete example straight from the sutra itself.
Okay, think about how we normally talk. There's always a subject acting on an object. For instance, I am going to adorn a paradise. We see I and the adornment as 2 totally separate things. But the Buddha's insight is that true adornment only happens when you realize the label, adornment, is just a concept. There's no real separation between the doer, the doing, and the paradise.
So when the Buddha says this, he's not just playing some clever word game. He's using this formula to shatter our attachment to the label. The real, living act of creating beauty isn't the fixed concept we call adornment, but because we need a word for it, we temporarily call it that. It's just a pointer to a reality that's way more fluid and interconnected.
So now we have the key. In our final section, we're going to take this powerful logic and bring it all the way back to that paradox from the very beginning. We can finally figure out what makes a true bodhisattva. Let's see how it all comes together.
So, using the logic we just learned, if someone stands up and proudly declares, "I will save everyone," what are they really doing? They're creating a solid I, who is the savior, and a solid group of beings who need saving. They're stuck in those four illusions we saw earlier. And according to the sutra, that means they can't be a true bodhisattva.
And that's the punchline. A true bodhisattva is someone who has deeply and completely understood this law of no self. This isn't just an abstract idea. It's a framework for reducing suffering. Their compassionate actions just flow naturally from this understanding, free from the idea of I am doing a good deed. They act, but there's no actor taking a bow at the end.
And this leaves us with the ultimate question, one the sutra wants us to really sit with. If a true bodhisattva acts without the illusion of a self, and enlightenment is not a thing to be attained by a self, then who or what actually becomes enlightened? The text doesn't just hand you the answer, it hands you the question, because the investigation itself, that's the path.